Hi people. Today is the, at least for me, long awaited Impel Down video. Today I'm dressed as, I was originally gonna do Bon Clay, you know, if you're in the Discord. I was gonna do Bon Clay, but it didn't look right. You know, I would show you a picture, but honestly, if you follow my gaming channel, you'll see the makeup I did. But it just didn't look right, okay? I wasn't a fan. And so I went another angle. You know, there were several angles I was willing to go with the Impel Down video. For the first one I wanted to do was like a detective, but then I was like, that doesn't make any sense. I wanted to do like, you know, old school noir film vibes. But since the Bon Clay didn't work out, we're just gonna do I'm a warden in Impel Down. You know, the wardens are dressed as devils and demons. So I'm a fellow warden. I am freaking, you know, torturing people. I'm carrying out the torture of Impel Down prisoners, making sure that the torturous conditions are up to par, up to standard. That's what I am. I also get to do, you know, pretty makeup, so I think it's much better, you know. Real gaming heads know that I did this exact same look. Was it a year ago or maybe 2 years ago at this point? I don't remember. Or whenever I played Death and Taxes. Real fans would know. Real fans will know. The last we left off, Luffy was on Amazon Lily. He had just learned about Boa Hancock's past and now was determined to reunite with his crewmates. But he receives word that his brother is set to be executed. This changes his course from Sabati to meet up with his crewmates to Impel Down in his quest to save his brother. Modeled after Dante's Inferno, Impel Down has 6 levels. Each prisoner is assigned a different floor depending on their bounty, with the torturous conditions worsening the further you go. Similar to Dante, Luffy descends further and further to rescue his brother Ace at the lowest level. In this video, we will explore all 6 levels, following Luffy through his journey and learning about the true hell on Earth, the prison system. Impel Down will also be sectioned into 2 videos, one which is this one talking about the torturous prison conditions, and another one focusing on level 5.5 Newcomer and Bon Clay's character development. But before we get to any of that, subscribe. I have Instagram, TikTok, Patreon, Discord. There's so much, girl. So much to be involved with, so much to consume. It's amazing. It's a wonder that more of you don't consume it, you know. Instagram follow free. TikTok, I honestly don't even post my TikTok, so that's okay. Yeah, free. Discord free. Girl, it don't even make any sense. Okay. If you want to support more, like I said, I do have a Patreon where I have exclusive commentary content. I upload outlines, scripts for whenever I do a video essay, audio, or you can just support for $1 on the Patreon or here on YouTube where you get cute emotes. But anyways, level 1. Crimson Hell. Blade-like trees and needle-like grass stained with the blood of the prisoners who are forced to wander here. The entire arc opens with prisoners being waterboarded and tortured by the guards. It's immediately alluding to the torturous conditions of the prison system. Like, Oda makes it very clear from the jump, from the first frame. This level houses the least offensive prisoners, nobodies who hoard together, and massive cells with no privacy. This is where we find Buggy, who, along with another character who we'll get to in a second, becomes our comical relief. Honestly, it starts with this really offensive moment where the most narcissistic character is placed on the first level. The craziest part is he literally has the chop fruit, so he didn't even have to stay in the cell in the first place. He could have escaped at any time, which I didn't even realize when I was watching it until I read the fan Wikipedia, and then I was like, oh, you're so right. He loves the drama though. Buggy loves the drama. He just wants to ham it up. But nevertheless, he helps Luffy on his journey on the condition that he gives him the map to Captain John's treasure, which is the armband that Luffy wears, has been wearing for like the past few arcs, I believe, that was gifted to him by, I think, Nico Robin? Either Nico Robin or Nami, one of the two women on the ship, okay? But that brings us to our first level of the prison system, America. Now, I just want to give a disclaimer. These levels have virtually no correlation in terms of aesthetics or the environment to the actual levels in One Piece, except for when we get to level 3 and 4. They're simply based on the worsening conditions of each example. This descent into hell, into madness. Let me also preface that this is the start of the torturous prison systems. There are many countries that have similar conditions, or even some that have really good ones. You know, I'm not going to talk about every country and how they handle their prisons. I just can't do that, obviously. But do know that there are, of course, prison systems like in Western Europe is the place that I always think of, that do focus on rehabilitation and finding ways to treat prisoners like humans while still maintaining the prison system. But let's get to America, our first stop. The first thing that always alarms me about the American prison system is that it is the continuation of slavery. In fact, if you don't know, the 13th Amendment states that constitutionally slavery is permitted under the boundaries of the prison system. America is also home to the largest prisoner population. A lot of times that includes people that are not only impoverished, but people of color. Due to the wealth disparity in America, Black people are more likely to live in poverty, lack of reparations during the Reconstruction era, kind of the also continuation of slavery during the Reconstruction era with sharecropping, you know, just not getting a fair start at actually being treated like a human being. A lot of factors like that contribute to the wealth gap between white people and Black people today. And so because of all of that, Black people are more likely to live in poverty. Of course, if you are poor, your material conditions aren't met, which means you are more likely to partake in petty crime. You know, if you don't have food or can't afford food, you might steal food from, you know, a Target or something. In fact, 80% of all arrests are low-level crimes. Our jails and prisons are filled with people who have been targeted by over-policing for conduct related to homelessness, substance use, and mental health. Many people can't pay court fines and fees or bail for minor violations, face license suspensions, and jail time, essentially criminalizing poverty. It's a completely backwards way of doing all of this because, of course, if your material conditions aren't met and then you are getting bogged down by court fines and fees and bail, you know, it only worsens your conditions instead of, you know, actually providing solutions to make them better. You know, these policies like over policing only make poor people's situations worse. Black people are 13% of the population, but 35% of the incarcerated population. We are disproportionately locked up in prisons. Prisoners do some of the most integral labor, though, but get paid little to no money. Prison labor is a multi-billion-dollar industry and is legally mandatory for prisoners to do. They produce mattresses, spectacles, road signs, chairs for schools, but get paid pennies on the dollar with no help or path forward in most cases. Whether or not you have committed a crime or not, if you do labor, you deserve to get paid fairly for that. That should not be something where you are virtually doing slave labor at that point. NPR reports my day would start at 4 a.m. I would go into the kitchen. I would make the breakfast for 1,200 men. I would work lunch. I would work dinner, and I'd make $2.25 a day. I was diagnosed with HIV right when I got into prison, so I would have days where I physically did not have the energy to stand and work in the kitchen for 12 hours, but I had to work. You don't get days off, you don't get to have sick days, And if I didn't go to work, it was a rule violation. Most of that money went towards paying for things like phone calls, which would cost upwards of $5 per call, or items from the canteen like a bag of Doritos, which might cost $5. Dominique says they might spend an entire day's pay on one stick of deodorant. So it's not like this money is going to help you whenever you get out of prison or help you in really any meaningful way. You can't send it back to your family. It's kept within this ecosystem that you are doing the labor for, you know? So it's essentially slave labor, which is justified by our social conditioning of believing prisoners are less than humans, when most of them are in there for like selling weed or something, or, you know, stealing something inconsequential. The majority of prisoners aren't murderers, aren't violent criminals. They're human beings who, according to the data, have pretty much been effed over by the system, by our lack of policies that help with poor people and their meeting their material conditions. Because of that, this entire system is just fucked. There's a really good example of this in Louisiana. There's a prison called Angola, or Louisiana State Penitentiary, which stands out because it is a really good example of a direct continuation of slavery type conditions. Prisoners there literally pick cotton, and as we previously covered, a disproportionate amount of those prisoners are black. Prison work in the state dates back to before the end of the Civil War, when Louisiana built its first penitentiary and then leased out the prisoners to work for slaveholders. Angola itself is on a former slave plantation, and when the state took control in 1901, those incarcerated were housed in old slave quarters and forced to work in existing cotton fields. Like, it's literally just slavery at that point. And there are brutal conditions that these people are forced to work in. They forced people with disabilities and injuries to work for hours. The appeal reports Davis said he saw people suffer from dehydration and exhaustion. Prisoners have complained of lack of water. When he tried to refuse the work, he was told he could be compelled by force. Desperate one day, he purposely dropped a weight on his foot to avoid the labor, he said. But when he went to the doctor, he said he was charged with the destruction of state property. I was like, I know my rights, I'm not a slave. And they said, but yes, you are. Davis, a previous Angola prisoner, is working to get prison slavery on the ballot in 5 different states. Profit and not rehabilitation, retribution, or deterrence became the guiding penological goal of Louisiana State Penitentiary. Loyola University law professor Andrea C. Armstrong wrote in 2012. And that's not just an Angola thing, but a nationwide goal for profit to supersede rehabilitation in the American prison system. So as you can see with the things I've talked about, it spans not just whenever people get into prison and the labor that they are forced to do for no money. You know, obviously that needs to be fixed. They need to be paid more for, you know, making things that we interact with on a day-to-day basis. You know, items that these prisoners make, we interact with probably all the time. So not only how much they get paid needs to be changed, but also our policies on over-policing. We need to have more policies that help poor people to have upward social mobility, not just tax cuts, but things that at this point, especially with inflation, help with the cost of groceries, help with just everyday day-to-day costs that are really caused by corporations, but no politician is actually tackling that, even though that's the actual cost for why stuff costs so much. Oh my god, it makes me so mad. Wages need to go up whenever people are, before they get into prison. You know, there's just so much that needs to be fixed on an economical basis before the person even goes to prison, you know? There's just, it's sickening, it makes me mad. Oh my god, let's move on. Level 2, Wild Beast. According to Buggy, prisoners with a bounty of at least over 15 million berries reside here. This floor has several wild beasts who endlessly chase escapees until they lose the will to go on. Luffy, while he's there, creates mayhem, freeing the prisoners and Mr. 3, the second half of our comedic duo. If you remember Mr. 3 from Alabasta Saga, He was a part of Baroque works. You know, he's the candle guy. Some call him the cum guy. He's that guy. Yeah, he's that guy. I never would imagine that him and Buggy would work so well together as a duo. Like that, it just seems so odd before this arc, but it really worked. Like having some sort of time to breathe between all the fighting and all of that, it made the pacing that much better. I also want to take a moment to talk about the symbolism that I pointed out at the beginning of this episode with the hell in Dante's Inferno symbolism. I think that it only makes Oda's position on the prison system that much stronger. Beyond prison being an incredibly rough experience, the descent into hell could also allude to the lack of rehabilitation across the board, the lack of mental health resources, the worker exploitation. For a lot of prisoners, there's no sign of a better life. It's just this kind of like Dante's Inferno, this going deeper and deeper into this hell. It's concrete boots, as some have described homelessness as. You know, it's that same thing, that you're just being pulled down further and further with no sign. You can't even see the top anymore. And a lot of these individuals, as we covered, are coming from impoverished communities. Estimates of the number of poor people in our criminal justice system range from 2/3 to 80%, according to Revise. Once again, punishment for being poor. And it's also not helpful to punish addictions with sentencing. That's not how you solve or help addictions. In fact, it's just going to make it worse. The only option should be rehabilitation. Okay, that is the message of this entire video. Rehabilitation, especially for addictions. Like, that is a disorder. It is not something that should at all be criminalized. Like that to me is just so sick. Those people need help, not to be locked up. But also, of course, as I pointed out, the wardens in Impel Down also allude to this Dante's Inferno hell aesthetic, with Magellan and Vice Warden Annibal dressed as demons. According to the fan Wikipedia, they are not actually demons, but instead just wear detachable horns, which is an interesting fact. But let's go to our next stop, which is not as fun. Let's go to El Salvador. Now, this is going to escalate really quickly. If you thought America and the continuation of slavery was bad, it gets much, much worse. In an effort to gain control of the gangs, particularly MS-13, El Salvador militarized the state and built a mega prison. Prisoners are packed into huge cells, constantly surveyed, not allowed to visit their families. There's absolutely no rehabilitation programs, no educational programs. It is just a walking human rights violation. There have also been reports that prisoners have been unlawfully or arbitrarily killed, either from medical neglect or physical abuse, according to the US State Department. The most glaring issue is that thousands of innocent people are possibly detained in this prison. Police have to reach quotas each day, so many end up arresting young men off the street without any evidence that they're actually guilty. Amnesty International has called out the Bukele regime, stating that it undermines the presumption of innocence and the right to defense, among other guarantees of due process. NPR also reports that the murder rate has plummeted, but this way of action doesn't treat the underlying issues. Why do these gangs exist in the first place? If people's material conditions are not met, then the problem will only persist. But I have heard also, if I'm wrong about this, I'll fact check myself, but I have heard that MS-13 was actually dumped into El Salvador by America. So that's also a bigger issue, right? Is America just exporting their criminals to other countries? Yeah, another way that we brick up other countries. Let's go. According to Alfaro, nearly 1 million people are on the verge of starvation. There are 14% as of May 2022 that suffer from food insecurity. This is a temporary fix to a bigger issue. Even if MS-13 is not a El Salvador native, there are still people in El Salvador that may, because of their material conditions, their anger from all of that, end up joining these gangs as a way to feel like their issues are solved, or to have some sort of outlet that they aren't getting in their regular day-to-day life. It just doesn't still solve the issue. But now let's go to level 3 and 4, starvation and blazing hell. As Luffy traverses through these levels, things start to heat up. Pirates with a bounty of 50 million berries or higher are housed on level 3. They're left to practically starve and live on the brink of death as they lay in the unbearable heat. I feel like this arc is very Earthbound coded. Luffy is just constantly adding people to his party, which is a cute way to think about it, right? Before you get to the torture and the murder and level 4, the vat of boiling blood, you know, before you get to all of that, it's kind of cute. Level 4, like I said, is unique as no prisoners are housed here, but it is purely a site for torture. It is so hot that the boiling temperatures reach the level above it. Level 4 is also possibly inspired by one of the 8 hells of Buddhism, which is called Enetsu Jikoku. This is where sinners suffer from the heat and are either fried on a pan or penetrated by hot needles. As I said, in the middle lies a huge vat of boiling blood, and if a prisoner were to fall through level 3's hole, they very well could end up in that vat and die, only contributing to the pile of blood. This is also where Luffy has his infamous fight with Magellan, but ultimately the heat and Magellan's poison get the best of him, allowing the guards to lock him up in the next level, which is level 5. But before we go any further down Impel Down, we gotta go to our next stop on the torturous prison conditions stuff, Palestine, or I guess Israel. Now, Impel Down actually has some allusions itself to concentration camps or authoritarian leadership or fascist leadership, with the guards in Impel Down resembling Nazi or authoritarian officials. They have like even the symbol on their armband is very close to a, you know, another symbol we know. So there's allusions to that. But also level 3 reminded me of a certain concentration camp that is up right now as we speak and as we are alive today in the middle of the desert called Said Tayman. I hope I said that right. It is an Israeli detention center located in the middle of the desert, and according to CNN reports back in May 2024, this facility has partaken in a number of human rights violations. In content, I do want to give you content warning as there is reports of SA that we will be talking about. Behind barbed wire, there are rows of men in gray tracksuits sitting on worn down mattresses. Prisoners are not even allowed to speak to each other and instead mumble to themselves. We were told they were not to move. They should sit upright. They're not allowed to talk, not allowed to peek under their blindfold. Guards were instructed to scream "shut up" in Arabic and told to pick people out that were problematic and punish them, the source added. Israeli whistleblowers reported that underqualified medics sometimes amputate limbs to injuries from constant handcuffing. Air is filled with the smell of neglected wounds left to rot, another source adds. According to accounts, the facility, some 18 miles from the Gaza frontier, is split into 2 parts. Enclosures where around 70 Palestinian detainees from Gaza are placed under extreme physical restraint in a field hospital where wounded detainees are strapped to beds, wearing diapers and fed through straws. They strip them down of anything that resembles human beings, said one whistleblower who worked as a medic at the facility's field hospital. So there's just a lot of disgusting behavior I just rattled off there in this report. I do recommend that if you are, there's also a lot more to read in this report, so if you are interested in it, I always link my sources down below. Oh, I really do recommend reading more about it yourself. But it is only more further evidence that shows Israel's genocidal actions. And it's not just CNN who has reported on this, it's The Intercept. There's a bunch of, I'm not going to remember them all, but there's a bunch of sources that have also made their own reports on this. Even Israeli organizations have made reports on just how violent this place is. It's a literal concentration camp. But the most alarming fact, like I said, another trigger warning, is the SA. Practices recorded by UNRWA include the use of a nail gun on prisoners' knees, sexual abuse against both men and women, and the insertion of what appears to be an electrified metal stick into prisoners' rectums, according to Al Jazeera. Another detained man told UNRWA, "They made me sit on something like a hot metal stick and it felt like fire. I have burns in the anus. The soldiers hit me with their shoes on my chest and used something like a metal stick that had a small nail on the side," he said. It is just complete dehumanization of prisoners to an extremely unsettling level. If you are not disgusted by, we talk about America, but this is a facility that America is allowing to continue to exist by giving billions of dollars to Israel, billions of your tax dollars. If you're not going to be mad about the moral situation of just innocent people being tortured and killed, billions of your tax dollars are going towards a concentration camp or giving weapons to a country and a state that is putting people in literal concentration camps and saying they have the right to defend themselves. If this doesn't disgust you, I don't know what to say. Like, honestly, I do not know what to say. It's just a complete example of supremacist thinking, just thinking that Palestinians are just not human beings. And it definitely, for me as a personal thing, is a callback to Black people. There was a lot of atrocities during slavery where similar torturous conditions happened to Black people and no one cared. And also it happened to the Jewish people. They were also put into concentration camps for being alive. So if this doesn't disgust you, bro, I don't know what to say. Level 6. Now, there is a level between these two, obviously, that I skipped, level 5, which is very important to this arc. But as I said at the beginning of the video, we are going to do that in the next Impel Down video, talking more about Bon-chan's exploration of their queerness. I think it would be a little strange to insert that in a conversation about prison conditions. I think that, maybe that should have its own moment, just thought. Eternal Hell. The secret lowest level that harbors the worst criminals in all of the Blue Sea. This is exactly where Luffy wants to be because Ace lays in one of these cells. We also meet Jinbei, who definitely becomes one of my favorites, and I'm very excited for him to become a Straw Hat in like 500 episodes. The way and reasons Ace was arrested to me goes back to kind of our conversation during the Enies Lobby video. After defeating Ace, Blackbeard used Ace as leverage to become a warlord and then betrayed the world government, which I can't remember if we talked about that in the Enies Lobby video, but there is this concept called blowback where countries, particularly America is the one I think about the most, will fund terrorist groups to a lot of times replace their opposition in countries, their political opposition. Say if there's like a socialist who the people have democratically elected, they may fund a terrorist group or some political opposition to be in their place. But sometimes that doesn't always work out for the CIA or the American government. The whole situation with Blackbeard, giving him a position of power and then him immediately, like, it took not that long at all for him to betray the world government. Kind of reminds me of that, I think. But possibly we can explore that more in Marineford, as Blackbeard is much more prominent, I feel, in that arc. But the warden himself has the authority to execute any prisoner he wants on the spot, which he does when some of the prisoners mock his authority on level 6. Many of the prisoners are kept here for the rest of their lives or until their execution. In America, there is a dilemma when it comes to capital punishment, as well as all the other things that we have talked about. Not only is it way more expensive than keeping prisoners alive to, execute them, but there are plenty of innocent people who end up there. And once again, they're disproportionately black men. It loops back around to the dehumanization of prisoners and the punishment based on boundaries of race and class. You know, we've had these conversations before. But thankfully, there are organizations like the Equal Justice Initiative who help to get these prisoners off of death row. But let's go to our final stop on the torturous prison conditions, our final level. We will be talking about Guantanamo Bay and black sites. Now, Guantanamo Bay is, I think, pretty famous, but is a detention center that opened in 2002. Detainees are held without charges and fair trials, which goes against the US Constitution and deprives them of their basic human rights. They are also routinely tortured and abused, and the abuse is so hidden that I couldn't even find what type of torture they endured, but I assume it's kind of stuff that we've seen in Impel Down, like waterboarding and, you know, beating them, or, you know, I assume it's something along those lines, but I couldn't find exactly what it was. Probably for the best, honestly. I don't know if I want to know. Former US President Barack Obama issued an executive order to close the facility in 2009, and there is global consensus from the international community that the facility continuously violates human rights laws. Despite this, 30 men remain detained at Guantanamo today. Most of these men were never charged with a crime, and many of them were tortured. Over half of them were cleared for release or transfer years ago and are still awaiting next steps, which never seem to come, according to Amnesty International. Some detainees that have been transferred have been sent to unfamiliar countries and sometimes denied citizenship and basic human rights like travel, driving, and obtaining identification. Some are left stateless and not helped with rehabilitation at all or medical care after the immense amount of torture. Mansour is a Yemeni national that was captured by Afghan warlords and sold to CIA when he was only 18. That means that an American institution is just taking part in plain human trafficking. Now he lives in Siberia but is denied identification and the right to travel. I'm still there 22 years later. I lost everything there. Guantanamo is a facility created for torture, abuse, and targeting of Muslims. It's a crime against humanity. People died there. People were tortured. People were paralyzed. All kinds of torture, abuse, physical, mental, psychological. There were beatings. There are people that leave Guantanamo in wheelchairs and people who left Guantanamo in a coffin or a body bag. You are totally forgotten, totally disconnected from the world. You start to lose your sense of who you are and your identity. Cases like Mansour's show the US is partaking in some of the worst crimes against humanity and continues to perpetuate violence globally. But it doesn't end with Guantanamo Bay. There are an estimated 50 prisons just like it in 28 different countries used to hold the CIA's detainees. Following the 9/11 attacks, the US began to limit and remove mechanisms protecting human rights in the context of the global war on terror, lumping the United States with the likes of Stalin, Pinochet. The study cites the US practices as an unprecedented departure from established international humanitarian and human rights laws, specifically pointing to the Geneva Convention. A lot of the information is completely hidden about these sites, but we do know that they use the same enhanced interrogation techniques that are used at Guantanamo Bay. They also use secret flight plans, charter aircrafts, and subcontracting agreements to hide US involvement. As far as I know, current US presidents have done nothing to expedite the process of these prisoners' release and continue to partake in human trafficking and torturous prison conditions globally. We are just the absolute worst. So as you can see from all that we've talked about, which, you know, we barely talked about Impel Down, but it was a great arc, you know. But as far as we have talked about, it is the standard across the world to dehumanize prisoners. A lot of these examples I listed are on America's dime, like the Palestinian concentration camps in Israel, or the black sites and Guantanamo Bay, or America's own prison system, you know? ODA is very clearly stating from the first scene that this is hell on earth. This system involves some of the worst torture and treatment of human beings on the planet, and it is justified by racism, classism, and political interest. Oda is then inserting this beautiful anarchist character, like Luffy, my king, to tear this facility down. Luffy obviously doesn't seem to care in any way about the torturous conditions of Impel Down, don't get me wrong, because I know someone's gonna be like, Luffy doesn't care. Why you keeps bringing up Luffy? Luffy doesn't care. I get it, I know he doesn't care, but it's still this poetic action of this underdog once again destroying a harmful government entity, similarly to what happened in Enies Lobby. There's just something so poetic and beautiful about the image of that, even if Luffy himself as a character doesn't, give a fuck. Which is why Impel Down is definitely up there at top 3 at least. We're gonna do a arc ranking whenever I finish all of these videos for pre-time skip. Who knows when the frick that'll happen, but hopefully by the end of this year. I've been done with pre-time skip for like 3 months now, but hopefully by the end of this year we'll be done with all of these videos and we can do a cute little arc ranking, which Impel Down will definitely at least be in the top 3. It has exceptional animation, exceptional plot, it's exceptionally paced, it's perfect, it's gorgeous, it's amazing. And the Bon Clay part of the arc and Newcomma and Ivankov and all of that definitely add to that, which, watch the next video whenever it comes out, because we'll be talking about that. But that isn't to say that the prison system shouldn't exist. There are plenty of prisons, like I said at the beginning of this video, particularly in Western Europe, that have made efforts towards rehabilitation and more humane conditions. It can be done, it is possible. It's just about reworking our mindset and our practices. There should be absolutely no reality where I am alive at the same time that any of these examples are taking place, but yeah, I am. I'm alive while there are Palestinian concentration camps where people are being tortured and beaten and sexually assaulted. I am alive at the same time that the CIA is human trafficking random Yemeni nationals to Guantanamo Bay so that they can be tortured. I am alive at the same time that my own country is justifying the continuation of slavery, which is a horrible history that this country still really hasn't fully reckoned with. And it affects people like me that look like me. There should be no reality where that exists, but yet it is. We must abolish torture, capital punishment, and over-arresting in impoverished communities globally. It is time to set a new standard. It is time to change for the better. But that is all for me today, and I will see you in the next one. Okay, bye!